Okay, I believe that is a perfect time to start here. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Michigan Council for the Social Studies, my name is Brian Miller, and I would like to welcome you to the fourth and final day of our virtual conference, Cultivating Collaboration in Changing Times. We've got a great day of learning ready for you, and we are ready to get things started. I'm going to share my screen here and go through our PowerPoint that we have. A little bit here. In a couple of minutes, we'll be inviting our educators panel to the stage. Jessica Herron, Superintendent of Buckley Community Schools. Ashley Mccall, third grade teacher at Cesar Chavez Multicultural Academic Center in Chicago, Illinois. And Lynn Van Sickle, school board member at Coopersville Public Schools. But first, we have a couple of conference etiquette items to go over, and our schedule is posted here on the left. Regarding attending sessions, at the end of each session, please take the session survey that is located on our conference app. These are individualized for each session, and the results will be shared with the presenters. You'll find the survey down at the bottom of each session description page in both the conference app and the web platform pictured on this slide. Mr. Johnson also sent a push notification out from one of our sponsors, Macmillan Publishing, who is giving away 3 books to anyone who attends one of their sessions. That'll be sent to your door, and they would love to see more people take them up on this. Again, please check your push notifications or watch for the Macmillan banner on the web platform. To catch a session recap later, come back to a session page in a couple of days. Dr. Rice's keynote address from yesterday and all sessions from the week were uploaded by Dave Johnson this morning and are available for viewing on the conference app. You'll have access to the entire conference's worth of learning for several months after the conference has ended. This is a great way to catch extra sessions that you may not have been able to watch live because other sessions interested you. There are up to 10 sketches of credits available for free for live attendance at the conference. In order to earn the credits, you'll have to fill out the sketchy Google survey form located in the crowd conference app for each session you attend. This will be confirmed by the attendance logs from Zoom. You must log into the chat log for each session with your full first name and last name. If you do not fill out the sketches form at the end of the session you attend, you'll be unable to earn that credit. While attending a session, please make sure to keep your microphones muted unless the speaker has requested verbal feedback. This will help make what the presenters are saying sound clear, both for the people attending live and for those catching those sessions later. You're welcome to keep your video cameras on or turn them off. It is up to you. We recognize that most of you are attending this conference from the comfort of your own home. If pets or children or your spouse interrupt your viewing during our session, feel free to just smile and shake it off. It is old hat at this point, and we are very much all used to it. Again, for sketches credit, make sure you type your full name into the chat once you've entered into the Zoom room for attendance purposes. You're also welcome to use the chat feature in Zoom to ask questions of our presenters and to communicate with your fellow conference attendees. Also, we have a message from our new social studies consultant at the Michigan Department of Education, Scott Koenig. On our website. We invite everyone to please visit mcssmi.org and view Scott's message to our social studies community. And finally, if at any point you're having trouble with the conference app or web platform, please shoot a quick email to Mary Burleson, which will throw her number in the chat once again, 517-819-9172, or email her at mburleson@mcssmi.org, and she will do her best to get this back and running. Questions regarding that? All right, we have a quick word from our sponsor at this point. This is the Mid-American Global Education Council, and then we'll get into our sessions. 20 here. If he comes in later on, we'll add that message from the Mid-American Global Education Council at that point. And so at this point, I believe we can just move on. Our presenters. This is our fourth and final day, and we're going to hear from some great educators. This is my favorite day for this. Today, we have a panel of educators at varying levels of the education spectrum and from varying districts. First, we have Jessica Herron. Jessica is the superintendent and elementary principal at Buckley Community Schools, a one-building K-12 rural school district in northern Michigan of about 440 students. She has a master's in education leadership with an emphasis in special education from Grand Valley State University. Jessica's work experience includes being the special ed supervisor of a center-based program for students with significant behavior issues, as well as a teacher consultant and resource room teacher. During her career, Jessica is focused on providing services and instruction for the whole child that provides students with the best post-secondary success. Welcome, Jessica. Next, we have Ashley Mccall. Ashley is in her 10th year in the classroom and has been a third grade bilingual English language arts teacher at Cesar Chavez Multicultural Academic Center in Chicago, Illinois for the past 6 years. In addition to teaching, she has served as a clinical instructor for the University of Chicago's Urban Teacher Education Program, a learning designer for the Academy Group, a teacher representative on the Chavez Local School Council, and Teach Plus board member. Ashley completed her BA in political science and Spanish at Amherst College and her MA in elementary education and teaching at Dominican University. Ashley has numerous publications through Chicago Unheard, Education Post, the Chicago Sun-Times, and the Education Trust. Welcome, Ashley.
Thanks for having me. Hi, everyone.
And third, we have Mr. Lynn Van Sickle. Lynn has served on the school board at Coopersville for over 10 years, including during 2 superintendent searches in 2011 and in 2020 as the board president. Coopersville Public Schools is a growing district located about 20 miles northwest of Grand Rapids and has a district population of approximately 2,600 students pre-K through 12, having moved to Class A for the 2021-2022 school year. Lynn is a lead engineer at Disher in Zeeland, Michigan, and has worked as a MHSAA official for 28 years. Lynn received his BS at Central Michigan University in Industrial Engineering Tech and his master's in engineering management from Western Michigan University. Welcome, Lynn.
Thank you, and look forward to the conversation.
Wonderful. And I'm hoping that I'll start this conversation off with a question, and then we're going to hear from our panelists, but I would love to get the rest of the questions from those of you who are here. So at any point we go through these, please feel free to put that question either in the chat or just verbally say it out loud. So we'll start with this one. A lot of us are classroom teachers, and we also have some curriculum people and some ISD people and some professors as well. How has the atmosphere in your building changed over the last few years? What have you guys seen specifically from where you are at? And whoever wants to start, feel free to do so.
So I can offer to go first. How has the atmosphere changed? We have gotten extremely used to being way more flexible as far as staff atmosphere has gone, switching between virtual and in-person. And hey, I showed up for this Zoom link today. If this had been a year ago, this would not have been something that would have gone nearly as smoothly as it goes now. As far as student body goes, we definitely at the beginning had this great appreciation for returning to school and seeing friends in person, but we're also seeing a lot more behaviors than we traditionally have seen, especially in younger students who just haven't had exposure to public experiences. You know, they haven't been to grocery stores, they haven't been to restaurants, let alone in a school setting with a lot of people. and our parents are definitely more stressed than they have been in the past, whether it's because of at-home things or the amount of help they've had to provide for school and homework. They are feeling a lot more pressure, I think, than they have in previous years.
Ashley, Lynn, you guys want to add to that?
Sure. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Lynn. Go for it.
No, got it. I love to listen to you first.
All right. I definitely echo what Jessica said about some of the shifts in behavioral dynamics. And I would extend that beyond just what we're seeing from students to some of the behaviors and attitudes that we're seeing from educators like myself and from families as well. To Jessica's point about lack of public experiences, it takes a reminder to realize how many years students were out of the classroom before coming back to have a consecutive, uninterrupted school year in the building. And so when we first came back, there was a lot of conversation and honestly frustration about, I don't understand why I'm hearing, this language from my sixth graders, or I don't understand why my third graders are taking so long to master A, B, and C. And it takes a reminder of, oh, well, my third graders, their last complete school year was kindergarten. And so when we think about all that is traditionally covered, not just in terms of academic content, but in terms of social and emotional support and development, and those public experiences, everything from routines, getting from home to school and field trips, all of that's been lost essentially. And so we've seen at every single grade level, at every single, for every educator experience, right? There's been an experiential gap that is really leading to really a brand new way of meeting students and educators and even school leaders and families where they are. I would say another thing that I've seen that is, I'm sure we all have our own version, name, language for like burnout, right? It's different though. Like what we're seeing and feeling now is different because we haven't been in this sort of during and post-pandemic space of trying to navigate what it looks like to do this work sustainably and what it means to see and experience stress, again, at all these different levels from all these different stakeholders. I'll kick it over to Lynn.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure how much more I can add to all that, other than, we've learned to be flexible. We've learned that people want to be heard. So from, the building perspective, students and staff wanted to be heard. Parents wanted to be heard. So that's spilled, from my perspective, spilled into the boardroom. And we certainly had a few more folks coming to board meetings and expressing thoughts and concerns, and that stress that you two just described spilled into that arena. We created an atmosphere as best we could to listen. We didn't have all the answers. We didn't have. We weren't ultimately driving things. And so going from 2 years ago to, as Mr. Milliron mentioned, we hired a superintendent at the beginning of 2020, and to where we are today, is back to as close to normal as could be expected, with the exception that you two just mentioned, is kids have a gap. So, and I think in our buildings, we're doing the best we can to accommodate that. But as a community's perspective, those that were stressed and frustrated and wanted to be heard have ultimately come back to us and said thank you, for doing all we could do along the way. And I can't tip my hat high enough to all the educators on here and to our staff and administrators, to all they've endured over this time. It's something that we couldn't have written and described. So it's I would say we're on a good trajectory, but a lot to be done yet with those kids that are still have a gap.
Those are great points, guys. Let me open it up to everyone here that's participating. Does anybody have a question that they would like to ask? So it's not just coming from me. Mary, Lindsay, Scott, anybody have something?
I'm curious if you have experienced both in the classroom and as a board, some of the hostility coming from parents that goes beyond having questions and concerns, but outright hostility towards teachers, towards other staff, towards board members, towards the superintendent, very aggressive in very strong emotional feelings. Is anybody else experiencing that?
Maybe I'll start from the board perspective. We were extremely fortunate. Local districts around us, I think, felt maybe a little bit more of that than we did. And I think there's a variety of reasons behind that. So we didn't have any extreme hostility. We had people that wanted to be heard. Certainly the numbers in our board meetings went from administrators and a few folks, maybe a 10 or 15 people at our board meeting to, over 100, 150 at a few. So to cycle through that and let everyone be heard, we had a process. We took notes and we got back to those that expressed issues and concerns as best we could. But we found being consistent with allowing people to be heard was good ultimately. I mean, that started in early pandemic time of our board meetings were Zoom meetings, and we took questions kind of beforehand. We didn't allow others to get into the Zoom, and we've migrated all the way back to more normalcy now. So again, we were very fortunate in that we didn't have any real extreme scenarios or caustic situations like some other districts around us did. But I think part of that was because of some of the things we had in place already to deal with and set some clear expectations up front.
So I would say similar. We did not have very often that aggressiveness that would come. I will say there was a lot of intentional upfront communication and clear ways for parents and community members to be able to communicate. I did have, though, a lot of extremely just emotional parents, a lot of parents calling in and just breaking down and saying, I can't do this and I need more help than I'm getting, and not necessarily just from school. Then this year in particular, there was a lot more frustration around required extended absences. So families didn't have the guaranteed supports financially and payroll wise as they may have had last year or in previous years. So there was a whole lot more, it wasn't so much anger, but just a huge sadness, or I don't know how my family is going to eat dinner tonight if my kid has to stay home for 10 days and I have to stay home with them. So it was much more a crisis feeling than they were really angry or threatening towards the school.
I'm not sure if anyone's following the chat, but I want to respond to Annette's question as well. But I asked a follow-up, which was, were there any topics in particular that seemed to be triggering for families, just so that I had a better understanding of where the question was coming from? And Mary mentioned just at first kind of some general anger, trying to get at the why. I'm seeing like masking, critical race theory, the online learning coming into the fall of 2021. I have been incredibly fortunate. Our school has wonderful partnerships with our families, and to Jessica's point about proactive communication and really trying to plan for worst case scenario, we were able to, on the front end, do a lot of work to sort of offset what might have been even more panic and stress and that feeling of overwhelm that was really sort of inevitable when we were all in the situation that we've been in for the last couple of years. I think the online decision was incredibly difficult, and I have worked with students whose families have been on complete opposite sides of, I am not bringing my kids to school until we have vaccines, they will be in masks, like I know they're supposed to be there, but I will not bring them, to the polar opposite of, we're losing learning hours for students. We should absolutely be in person. And Lynn mentioned this. A lot of families just wanted to feel that they were being heard and that their perspectives and circumstances were being considered. I think that it's interesting that our conversation, our theme is, right, collaboration, like in these times, because I think that we often just want collaboration to be so much easier. What seems so obvious and clear to us, we often imagine if we just explain point A, B, and C is going to be obvious and clear for stakeholder A, right? And the reality is that we have each arrived at our opinions because of our own experiences, our own values, our own priorities. And in such an urgent time that we've been living in and teaching through and child rearing in, we really haven't had the time, and we haven't given ourselves the time, which again, we haven't given it because we haven't had it. So this is not a blame thing. To like consider all of those things. Like, we want answers, we want solutions, and like our families want those things now, and our students want those things now, and so do we. But we can't like rush to fixing everything, which is, I think, a lot of where some of the anger that I've seen and that frustration has come from, is like, the problem I have is right now. And so, I want a solution right now that meets me where I'm at. And so how do we acknowledge the urgency of what students and families and educators are experiencing, while also like living in the reality that our opinions and perspectives like are complex, because like people are complex.
Thank you all very much. I think that, the biggest thing really was that masking and the virtual, and we had parents on polar opposite ends that, would come to board meetings or would storm into the principal's office and demand that every student should be wearing a mask, or my kid's not coming. We offered a virtual option, but still they were upset. And then when we had to take a couple of virtual days in the fall. How dare you, you're ruining my child's education by they're not getting anything. And so that the mask and the virtual was really emotional for people, and they were on extreme ends of the spectrum. And to see that played out in a board meeting, it was kind of scary, and to have, staff, like the administrative staff, we lost 2 principals. And I'm sure that had something to do with just being, attacked all the time about, why aren't you doing more? Why aren't you doing it this way? And it didn't matter what they did, they were getting it from both sides. For an example, we had parents were complaining that, you didn't even.
You're muted in that.
And you didn't even ask us if we wanted masks or not. So the superintendent set out a questionnaire. And then when the results came in, clearly people voted multiple times. This is a ruse. And it's like, okay. So that, I think it's your staff from, aides all the way, cafeteria superintendent, all the way through, are just really feeling the heat, increased allegations of bullying, kids are emotional, and parents are upset. And it's been a long, tough year.
So one thing, Annette, that I would say in response to that is, while I didn't experience a ton of that I did some as the superintendent. However, you are seeing that behavior in kids after watching us adults behave badly for an extended period of time. I do believe that is where some of our behavior in students is coming from, is people felt so elementally upset about whichever situation. And at school, you are face to face with these people. Like, a lot of this anger that we were feeling or hearing was over the phone, via email, via virtual settings. And then now I have all these kids face to face together, and Mama A feels this way and Mama B feels this way. And their kids are in school together, echoing what they hear. So that was certainly an increase we saw within the classroom, was just a strong difference of opinion. And now we have to address this with people in the room, and how do we handle that? It certainly increased those conversations.
Yeah, and I personally haven't had a parent go off on me. I try to be preventative by, whenever I think there's a concern, I call and we talk through it and everything. But just, we've had good teachers just be, we want to see their personnel records. And it's like, whoa, what in the world is going on here? It's just craziness. But you're right. These kids parrot their parents, and when we have conversations in social studies, I always say, I don't want to hear Joe Biden sucks or Donald Trump is a jerk. I don't want to hear that. We're not calling people names. We're going to have conversations that are respectful, but they're not seeing that at home. So like you said, they're doing at school what they see at home, I think sometimes. So thank you.
And that's your point about the social studies connection. There's really been unfortunate, circumstances have created an opportunity for us to be really thoughtful about how we create space for like critical conversations, right? So what, as educators, like we've had to really think through what structures are in place to, again, be proactive in thinking through like, how do we address topics? How do we agree and disagree? How do we develop arguments and support those arguments with, fact-based information? How do we share opinions in a way that's respectful, right? All of that is built into, hopefully, right? Ideally, like our curricular and our instructional practice. And we've really had to get better very quickly, right? At facilitating these conversations and helping students to develop those skills again, when they've had such a lag in-person communication and practice. So one of the things that I hope, we sustain moving forward is the importance of, again, having those structures in place and prioritizing these conversations before the crisis. I think so many of these were responsive, like, oh my goodness, students are going at it about the election or masking or da da da. And it's always so much harder to facilitate productive conversation when emotions are high and we're responding and we're trying to sort of put out a fire. But I hope that we've seen the value of putting those structures in place and integrating it into our daily classroom practice or weekly or whatever that looks like, because that is what we want to do for students at all times, not just, in response to a crisis.
Oh yeah, for sure. It just seems like it's leveled up for sure. And so we've had to step up our game on how to handle those hot button issues for sure. Thank you.
Great question in that, and it kind of alludes to this next one. How has the teacher shortage affected how you or your district works with students or just operates day to day as a whole?
I guess I'll go on this one too. We've been very fortunate overall in our district relative to teachers and shortages. It's been more in the parapro side of things or assistants and such. Not to say that everyone's not doing, as one of the comments said, extra jobs or extra things. But overall, we've been pretty fortunate to have great staff and great people. Have we had turnover? We have, probably like other districts have. We've been very fortunate to attract new staff as well. So it's a balancing act to create a culture that you want to have. Staff wants to stay. So even before the pandemic, we worked really, really hard on our strategy and what our culture is, and have long tenured staff. It's going to continue to be a challenge. As you probably all well know, I think we're on the edge of probably some of the worst that's coming, relative to what I'm hearing and seeing as the universities in Michigan producing more teachers. We're just not producing enough teachers to keep up with normal attrition as opposed to, retirements and such. I have a daughter that's just getting into the vocation. She just graduated. She's just entering in and she's going to be a social studies teacher. Super excited for her. She's extremely passionate. We need more of those students to come out. There's a variety of hurdles for that. So legislatively, how can we help those hurdles for young people to want to get into being a teacher and make sure they can have a career of it? There's a lot of pieces to it. They have passion around it. Obviously, financially, there's impact there that that we continue to push on the state and legislator to help us out and be better with that as well. So we've been pretty fortunate. I think we're not over the hill yet on it. It's going to continue to be a thing for us for sure.
Yeah, and I would certainly say I would not refer to it as a teacher shortage. I would refer to it as an educator shortage or all. It's not specific to schools either, from what I'm aware, everyone, it's employee shortage. We have definitely felt it across the board. And it's not just so much, it's not that I don't have people in the positions, but every day, every position has to be filled. And when you have people out for extended absences, that is extremely difficult to do. I'm a very small rural school. I am next to nothing. So there's not like I can pull from other places to get people to show up. The one new piece of legislation that says anyone in the building can teach a classroom, slightly frustrating because those other people in the building are there with a full-time job. I really can't pull the lunch lady out of the line to go teach a classroom because she's busy all day long. So my staff has been amazingly flexible. You come to work and you just really never know exactly what job you're doing. I joke that I have a let's see who can win the award for how many people you can be in one day, because it's dynamically changing. We are seeing a flattening out of that right now with much of the quarantine rules going away and those requirements lessening. We are seeing our jobs being filled more consistently and less needs for daily shortages. We have been blessed. I have a good culture within the building. So being able to hire people has not so much been the struggle. It's just people really do get sick and they have to be home with their own children. So if their children are ill or quarantined, and a really unique thing we've experienced this year is the amount of daycare shutdowns that have impacted my building's ability to operate, because when the whole daycare shuts down, my staff just have no place to send their children. And so they're not able to come to work either. And I have a lot of teaching families where both parents are teachers in my district. So that has been a significantly new and different struggle than we've really experienced before.
I will briefly share that what Jessica shared about throwing anyone in a classroom as a short-term fix. It's like not even the right language, right? I don't even know what the language is, but it's not a fix, right? It is, and what really kills me about that as a Band-Aid solution is that it's pitched as like, we need people in front of our students, our kids are losing instructional time. But oftentimes we're not putting folks who have the abilities to provide the high quality instruction that we want for our kids. So that is incredibly backwards. And so when we think about the legislation needed to make sure that we're not just putting warm bodies in classrooms that of course like care about our kids, and we've been so fortunate to really be working collaboratively to staff buildings, that is not a solution when we think about what is required to provide the education that our students need and deserve.
Great points there, everybody. Does anybody else have a question? Or I can move on to the next one on my list. All right, it was good wait time. I'll skip down to this one due to the conversation we just had regarding legislation. How would you describe the level of support you are receiving currently from your state's legislature regarding funding and backing as you navigate through the current atmosphere in education?
I muted myself back. I actually sort of want to throw a wrench into this question a little bit, and I would be curious to know from other folks what gaps you feel like there are, right? Like from a solution-oriented standpoint, like what is it legislatively that you feel you've been missing? Because those are opportunities to again, rally stakeholders to make sure that we're advocating for the legislation that we need. Oftentimes it's folks who either have been out of the classroom for many, many years or who've never had any sort of classroom or school experience who are making the laws about what it is that our students and educators are going to get. And so I'm always eager to hear from families and from educators and from students, what is it that you are missing and where are the policy opportunities like to help make that happen, which I don't think is necessary. It is and isn't necessarily unique to like one school or one district. So I would be curious to know if in the chat or from other folks, what your thoughts are.
One thing that we could refer to is the level of financial support that different districts get, and what a BA step one pays at a district. I know that at Whitehall, a BA step one is $47,500, and I know that where Jessica is at is significantly less than that. I know Mr. Van Sickle is going through a contract negotiation very soon for Coopersville. And the disparity that we're seeing, especially with rural schools, and as Jess, I'm sure will attest to, is significant.
Yeah, our starting is 30 or 31. So we're, 16,000 starting. And then when you accumulate that over time, retirement and benefit, I can't even compete. So what's also a struggle is once I get a teacher in place, I train really great teachers and then they move next door. So that's a struggle. I do wish there was a piece of legislation around, and other states do this, after a particular date, if you have a signed contract with a school, that you cannot move. So what happens to me often is I'm very small and I have very large districts around me, and they take my teachers August 25th. And I always hire somebody on Labor Day and we start the day after. So that would be a legislative piece that would be really beneficial to us, is if there was just a date that if you have a signed contract, you can't bail on that person. Or I'll do interviews. They'll take my job as the safe holding place and they still have other interviews that they're pursuing.
Yeah, and there continues to be the disparity for sure. In Michigan, I think we're in a position overall, Coopersville specifically, we really haven't had a better scenario for funding in a long time. We've been pretty fiscally responsible over the years, and we've been in a pretty good spot overall financially. Brian, you bring up a great point about contracts and it's interesting to hear in one conversation the disparity between where districts are that aren't that far away from each other. And I think from a legislative perspective and from a narrative perspective, we as board members and legislators need to intentionally change the persona a little bit. Teachers are there for our kids. You guys just are insurmountably valuable for our children, and we have to make sure that profession exudes that. People want to do that, but they also need to get paid to do that job. I was extremely frustrated for my daughter to do her student teaching and not get paid. I'm an engineer, and if I would have gone through an internship and not gotten paid, I'm like, what's going on here? So there's a lot of little things that hopefully we can work in there too, from the attraction and early on perspective. And obviously contract negotiations, and we have to not necessarily look at what the other districts are doing next to us and do what they're doing for reasons we're not sure why they're doing them, but we have to be competitive. And that's not just finances, but it's also what are we doing culturally, what's the district culture as well. So I think there's a lot to be done yet with school funding. Things could change year to year depending on who's leading in our capital. So I think there's some things to put in place. You mentioned the teachers leaving last minute. That's frustrating. We've had that too, and that's frustrating when you have a plan and things change. And I know it's difficult for everybody. So I guess short of it, we're doing pretty well, relatively speaking, but there's definitely room for improvement.
It's interesting that Lynn used that word competition or competitive, because I was thinking that in my mind, and I'm going back and forth between this idea of competition and collaboration, right? Which like don't really seem to go hand in hand. And we're often put in positions where we're competing for the best teachers, we're competing for funding, we're competing so that our students can have the best experience possible. But what happens then is that we lose track of the fact that most of us, right, are in education because we believe that all students deserve the best experience possible. And when we are put in positions where superintendents and principals are competing and are fighting for the best, ultimately students somewhere lose. And that is not the conversation that a lot of folks like across districts are having, right? So I'm in Illinois. I think a really clear example was several years ago, we did a lot of advocating for a new funding formula across the state of Illinois. Districts across the state are different. I'm in Chicago. I have colleagues that are in rural Illinois, colleagues that are in suburban Illinois, and this was going to impact everyone differently, but ultimately make sure that according to student need, according to school and district need, that is how funds would be distributed. It was very easy to get caught up in the narrative that, oh, well, my students, my school would be losing money, right? Which is not the case. No dollars were taken away from everyone, but we're thinking moving forward, how do we equitably distribute these funds to meet the different needs of students, right? So what would it look like to take that sort of process for equitably distributing resources, for making this profession like more attractive, more sustainable, and a place where folks want to stay, and do it in a way where, of course, like you want to be in the best possible school, the best possible situation for yourself as a parent, a student, or an educator. Plus, right, there's many other fabulous groups of people. But how do we do that in a way that, again, is not ultimately harming students and leaving different subgroups of students with like thin pickings, right? Because that has been the case since the beginning of time. And ultimately, we need to be moving away from that.
Great point, you guys. Question from the group? Jess had to leave us a little early. All right, just because I want to keep it a little bit on the positive rank, so let me ask this one. What is going well in your district, or you see as in education as a whole, that kind of gives you confidence about the future? I know it feels like it's not been doom and gloom, and I've worked more preps this year than I think I have in the last 8 years combined, and it just, there's that feeling over the building. But what gives you confidence for the future? What do you see as a positive right now, or what do you see in the near future?
I just spoke, so I'm going to defer to Lynn first.
No worries at all. I guess for us, the current positives are as much about getting back to doing all the things we were doing 2 years ago. It was extremely difficult for those kids that graduated during this time frame that missed out. I'll take that to the young kids that missed out on education. So positive things going on. We're running on all 8 cylinders. We're back as best we can to normal with, getting kids involved in as much as they can be. Obviously, day-to-day classroom activities are extremely important, but getting kids involved in other co-curricular activities, whether that's the arts, science club, robotics, athletics, band, we intentionally invest in those things as best we can. Because having another idea for kids to be involved in is huge. So a lot of positives around that. We have, in our district, from a positive perspective, we get over 400 school choice kids that come into our district, and mostly in secondary, middle school, and primarily high school. For a district of 2,600 to have 400 school choice kids coming in, we got a lot of positive things going on for that to happen. Extra classes for kids to take that you don't get necessarily maybe in some schools our size or a little smaller. So those are all good, positive things that we're trying to get the momentum back going again. Trying to get parents' involvement, reaching out to the community. We have a bond proposal coming up in 2 weeks, so it'll be a huge positive, hopefully for us over the next couple of years as well. So I guess for us, just basically backing up a little is getting more back to where we were a few years ago with all the different activities and involvement that we have with our overall community population, whether that's staff, students, community, etc.
Awesome. I'll jump in, and I want to share some of the great things in the chat. So Mary sharing about just the sense of knowing that we can be flexible, and we have been flexible, and have we've done what we needed to do as best as possible to meet student needs. And I echo that. Nonprofits stepping up. I'll say I've seen like mutual aid, other neighborhood groups really bring back that sense of community school and everyone being a part of the education of our students. Positives. I said in the chat that I'm not the queen of optimism. I meant like not lately. Like lately, I'm the queen of like one day at a time, one moment at a time. I've been, again, so fortunate. My school just has an awesome staff, and our administration is so thoughtful about how to make it as easy as possible for the staff to do our jobs. Right. So how can the logistics be super tight as much as possible with all of the flex so that we can show up and spend our time like meeting student needs? And we've been able to work so collaboratively with families over the last couple of years, and communication has just been above and beyond. And that's really encouraging, because I think we've set a new bar, a new standard for what collaboration with families can look like and what communication can look like. And I think it's because we were forced to get really creative with how we were sharing information when I couldn't just meet you after school and during dismissal, or I wasn't sending home those physical like weekly newsletters. And I'm hopeful that we will continue to get creative, because we've again been forced to when we almost we hit the gym and had to do some extra weightlifting, and it's like, oh, I'm a little stronger than I thought I was. Like, who knew? And it's hurt a little bit, but that's how I feel a little bit about how our sort of horizons have been broadened in that sense. I know that everyone has totally different feelings about remote learning, but anytime I get to brag about my team, I do, because it was so hard. I will say that the team that I had a chance to work with that first year of shifting to remote learning and the following, I'm so proud of the work that we did. There were so much, and someone said this in the chat, but like so much noise around learning loss. I'm so sick of that phrase, right? Because while a certain experience was certainly lost, right? A lot of different types of learning most certainly did happen. We had solid content instruction. We had to work through for some of our kids, right? One of the most challenging personal and social emotional experiences they've ever had, right? And in order to get to where we are now and to continue to move through it requires learning. And we did that alongside the discussions and the collaboration and the content knowledge and the assessments and everything else that we were and are continually expected to do, right? So yes, something was lost, but we most certainly like gained and can continue to gain and grow and flex, to use Mary's language, like as a result of this experience. And that makes me hopeful, because I hope people, see that, you get out the gym, you're sweating, it hurts, it's ugly, but then like you wake up and you're like, oh my goodness, I did that. Like I lifted that weight and I'm still here. And I think I just saw Mary like mouth it, like we are stronger, and it hurts. Like like don't get me started. It has hurt. It continues to hurt. And I am not, what is it? Oh, I can't remember the phrase. Like toxic positivity is like not my jam. Like I will really, like, if you are struggling, by all means, continue to like sit where you are. I'm not, trying to like pull you to make you feel any type of way, because that's certainly not where I have been. It's been incredibly hard, but even as it continues to be difficult, though hopefully easing up, right? We have grown, and that means our students and families have grown right alongside us, right? Because we're doing this all together. So that would be my note of optimism.
Great question. Great answers to that question, guys. Anybody else have a question? Or I can go on to the next one. Because what Ashley said kind of bridges it to this next question here. One of the major concerns over the last couple of years of being in this kind of non-traditional kind of setup is the loss of rigor in some cases. And I know there's a number of AP teachers in here as well. I know I've had more kids drop AP classes over the last couple of years than I ever had before. So maybe that's anecdotal, I don't know. But how has rigor changed in your buildings or your district as a whole over the last 2 years? And do you think this is a problem, or is this just a short-term blip?
Again, very curious to see other folks' opinions in the chat. I will jump in since I've been teaching through this whole wild roller coaster. To me, this is right alongside, like, this is the next door neighbor to learning loss, because what is lost in the question of, or the concern about rigor, which I've had these conversations with families, right? To the point where I'm like, by all means, watch what your child is doing on screen. Take a look at the materials that are in Google Classroom and let's have a conversation about like what you think is missing, and also look at it alongside what students have done, at this same time of the year, et cetera, et cetera. Because what's missed in that is that I'm teaching your student potentially, right, your child, the same content, but without 2 in-person years of instruction. So absolutely, in the same way that we differentiate for our students who are coming in, reading below grade level, not knowing certain calculations, not having historical references, that's all we're doing this year. And it never means that I'm not teaching grade level content or that I'm not really, pushing the envelope on what students are ready for. That's never it. It's that we're introducing students to rigorous content and preparing them, like giving them the skills they need to like engage, and also acknowledging that there are gaps, and that throwing you in 10 feet of water when you don't know how to like doggy paddle is not teaching. That is not teaching, right? Like I still need to, let me hold your hand in this 10 feet of water. Like, let's paddle together. And the same day, now let's go to 1 foot and we do both. And so I am just very wary of any, not conversation, but sort of any one line, hey, there's no rigor, or hey, learning loss. It's not that simple. And any of us that have been in the classroom know that. So getting off my pedestal.
How to follow that? I guess from our perspective, the rigor standard didn't change. The expectation was still there. And I think those kids that were impacted, and quite frankly, staff members that were impacted by being out of the classroom, not able to teach, not able to learn for a period of time, it wasn't a rigor loss, but their experience was different. And I think the bigger frustration that we had was kids that were out of class that were healthy and didn't get to experience that in-person rigor, even though the expectation was the same. That was frustrating for them. So certainly the learning was different, but the expectation, the rigor that was expected and that was delivered for the most part was the same.
Great answers. With about 4 minutes left, I'll make this last question quick here. Little pie in the sky thought here. If you were in charge of education completely, magic wand and everything, what would be the first thing that you would do or change just to make things better for everybody?
Just had a conversation today around this, and it was more industry specific, but it had to do with students in manufacturing. And part of the question was, why aren't we doing some of the things we used to do to allow kids more exposure to different career paths? And some of the answer is some of the compliance related issues and some of the way the funding is given to us, and we have to ultimately spend it. if we didn't have to deal with some of those things and we could let the great teachers and the great administrators do what is best for kids, yes, with some boundaries, I think that would go a long way to getting every kid an opportunity to have a career in whatever they choose to do. Our mission is to inspire students to have a lifelong love of learning. So having a little bit more wiggle room to do those things without all the different compliance related things that we have to do, for me, and what I heard literally from some of our staff today, that would help bring some of those pieces into play that they don't get to teach because we have to have all these standards that have to be met first.
This question always stresses me out because just the interconnected nature of everything, and to pick the one sort of magic wand feels impossible, because there are so many different components, different groups of stakeholders, and because education is constantly changing, right? So education when my mom was a principal, education when my mom was a teacher, when my grandmother was a teacher, is so different than what it looks like right now. And so maybe it is like the flexibility that I often feel like we need and even ask for and advocate for, but don't often get. The ability, the encouragement to take the risks that we think need to be taken in our classrooms, to shift, to add on to the curricular a little bit, to do something that's not quite mapped out. I know in terms of a curricular rigidity, that's different everywhere, but I think really great education involves risk taking and involves listening to the voices of those who are closest to the ground, and that really means our students as well. And that requires risk. And a lot of times we don't feel like we have the wiggle room to do that because of Lynn's point about we've got these test scores that have to look a certain way, the attainment, the growth. We've got to make sure we qualify for this federal funding. We have to make sure we check all the boxes. And the time that we're using to check the boxes is often time lost doing some of those things that we know we want to do and probably should do for our students, but just, we don't really have the hours to do it. And so I guess flexibility and time, of course, which we all want more of.
Very, very true. Great job, everybody. Ashley Mccall, Lynn Van Sickle, Jessica Herron, thank you very, very much for your time today. It was outstanding. We're going to head to a break at this point, give you some time to get in your sessions, which will start at 5:40 p.m. This evening. Please enjoy the upcoming sessions and have a great conference experience. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, Ash.